Hello everyone, I'm glad to share our paper on the impact of sample duplication in machine learning-based Android malware detection. First, I will introduce the background of this paper. The first concept is the word duplication. As shown in this picture, duplicates are very common in our life. For example, two identical documents, two identical pictures, or two duplicate records in a SQL data table. The second concept I will introduce is Android malware. The security of mobile apps is now a critical research and practice issue because there are so many different kinds of app developers, vendors, and brokers. It's hard to make sure that each app can be quickly and thoroughly examined for security and privacy concerns. Malware, or malicious software, is a blanket term for any kind of computer software with malicious intent. Android malware is malicious software that specifically targets Android devices. Ideally, mobile apps should be analyzed to check their security and privacy requirements conformance. However, when performed statically, app analysis is often time-consuming, may produce many false positives, and will not identify all problems that occur at runtime. On the other hand, the dynamic analysis doesn't scale and often can't cover the whole codebase. Therefore, in recent years, the research community has progressively shifted to view machine learning as an affordable and worthwhile effort for identifying security issues, in particular malicious behavior in mobile apps. However, after promising results have been reported, the community has started to reflect on the potential biases that many machine learning-based research experiments carry. For example, some researchers have experimentally shown that the performance of malware detectors is actually highly dependent on experimental parameters, such as dataset construction. Dataset is a critical ingredient in the training and validation of all machine learning-based models. However, so far, the app analysis community has paid little attention to the quality of datasets beyond the problems of class imbalance and temporal alignment. Concerning the quality of datasets and their impact on machine learning models, Admanis has recently raised the concern of code sample duplication, that is, the phenomenon where a given sample is repeated several times in the dataset. In this paper, we attempt to clarify the effect of sample duplication on the performance of malware detectors. Machine learning is relied upon to perform malware detection at a large scale in many published toolsets and experiments. There are mainly two scenarios. Binary classification models are trained to predict the maliciousness of an app. These are generally supervised learning scenarios, where the entire dataset is labeled for the experiments. In contrast, the problem of malware family identification is often modeled as an unsupervised learning scenario, that is, samples are grouped together based on their similarity. Since for the large majority of the machine learning-based approaches proposed for malware detection, feature engineering targets code artifacts. Our study will thus focus on code-related samples. According to the commonly used features of these state-of-the-art approaches, we focus on 4 levels of artifacts that may be subject to duplication when they constitute the learning datasets. The first is APK samples, that is, the whole app packages. And the second one is the DEX code, the entire code within the app package. And the third one is the OP code sequence. That means the low-level machine language instructions. And the last one is the API calls. That means only the specific parts of the code that interact with the framework and access sensitive physical resources. In this paper, we propose 4 research questions that explore the sample duplication impact on cases of both supervised and unsupervised learning approaches. The first one is, does the duplication phenomenon occur in Android malware datasets? And the second one is, what is the impact of malware sample duplication on supervised learning for building Android malware detectors? And the third one is the impact of sample duplication influenced by a specific underlying supervised learning algorithm? The last research question is, are unsupervised learning models impacted by sample duplication bias in a similar way to supervised learning models? We now present the machine learning algorithms that are leveraged in this work to implement Android malware predictors. Using several state-of-the-art malware detection approaches described in the literature, we train binary classification models to predict malicious content of sample apps. Specifically, we have focused on the following 4 algorithms: support vector machine, decision trees, the k-nearest neighbor, and random forest. And in this paper, sample duplication refers to the idea that some learning data samples appear multiple times within a corpus. Actually, a common practice in machine learning experiments is to split any existing dataset into 2 parts: a training set that is used to train the machine learning model and a test set where the performance of the model is measured. For example, the splitting process may put the same samples into both training set and test set, leading to biased learning. So we define these 3 duplicate bias: in-train duplicates, in-test duplicates, and cross-set duplicates. The other experimental setup is about feature engineering. The listed feature set covers a wide range of characteristics of Android apps and has been adopted widely by the research community. In this work, our experiments leverage this comprehensive feature set to build relevant classifiers that match the typical performance recorded in the literature. Our first research question focused on investigating the presence of duplicates within commonly used Android malware datasets in the literature. The table summarizes 4 representative datasets and provides some descriptive statistics about their size and diversity in terms of numbers of malware families that are represented. The names of the investigated datasets are Genome, Dragon, AMD, and RMVDroid. Recall that I have introduced these 4 levels of artifacts before. We then discuss sample duplication in terms of these 4 levels. The first is APK sample level. Because the samples are often named by their hash value, commonly used datasets do not include duplicate APKs, but we know that the datasets are often redundant from one to another, as shown in this table. For example, there are 2,618 crosses between AMD and RMVDroid dataset. Although researchers appear to ensure that datasets are not duplicated at the APK level, we find that the relevant in-APK components may be duplicated. The other 3 within dataset duplication is summarized in this figure about desk code, OP code sequence, and API calls. For example, a dataset including several repackaged versions of a given app where only layout and image changes are applied will lead to a duplicated dataset of DEX code clones. We know that DEX code duplication may involve 40% of samples. For the case of the Dragon dataset, this means that for 40% of its app samples, there exists at least one other sample in the same dataset that shares the same DEX file with them. During our analysis, we have found that the actual distribution of the size of malware families is often highly imbalanced, as illustrated in this figure. In the Dragon dataset, within the 179 families that are enumerated, some are represented with a single APK sample, while other families include hundreds of samples. This imbalance, if ignored, may introduce biases to malware clustering approaches and hence the performance of machine learning-based malware classifications. In practice, samples in a dataset may have different importance when conducting clustering-based approaches. Therefore, it is important to properly adjust the sample distributions or weights when clustering a dataset. Okay, now I will conclude this paper. Our investigation starts with a review of recent state-of-the-art approaches in machine learning-based malware detection. Through this, we identify some artifacts whose duplications in the datasets may not be obvious to experiments. We then discuss theoretically the possible effect of sample duplication on learning models. Then we quantify the extent of sample duplication in widely used AMP malware datasets. Finally, we perform large-scale experiments analysis of the effect of duplication by considering two learning scenarios for malware detection: binary classification of maliciousness and the supervised learning problem, and malware family clustering as an unsupervised learning problem. Based on our experiment findings, we provide a discussion on the quality of the current malware datasets, as well as on the validity of their recorded performance in the literature. And for the findings, our experimental exploration revealed that first, widely used malware datasets include a considerable amount of duplicate data samples. Given recent studies on the adverse effect of duplicate code for machine learning models of code, many promising results and findings in the literature are potentially threatened by this issue of duplication bias. With comprehensive experiments covering different types of dataset samples, we have shown that the impact of duplicates in commonly used datasets remains marginal. This is for the typical supervised learning models that are proposed for app malware detection. No matter tenfold cross-validation or in the wild experiments are applied. And the third one is the marginal impact is consistent across different machine learning models trained on different algorithms, including random forest and SVM. And the last one is we have shown that unlike supervised learning, for which insignificant impact is observed for malware detection, the impact of sample duplication on unsupervised learning, especially on malware clustering, is however quite significant. Based on these empirical studies, no matter how significant the impact of sample duplication might be, we appeal to the community that our fellow researchers and practitioners should always take sample duplication into consideration when performing future machine learning via either supervised or unsupervised learning based Android malware detection. Thanks for listening.